Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here, coming at you once again from Brazil. We will be heading home in a few days, and in the meantime, I will be playing a little bit of Path of Exile 2. I know we got a new season and some cool stuff, but it won't be like really long streams until I get home. I will be streaming a little bit while I can in the few days I have left here. But one thing I have done is I have updated my main build guide on Mobalytics. That's right. We are playing Infernalist minions once again. And if you guys do want to check out the written guide, I do have a link in the description for you guys. There's a lot of new stuff happening, but the Mobalytics team has been hard at work and they have fully updated their builder. So it is in a form that I can show you guys what I plan to do this league. Now, keep in mind that we are very early into this league and there are a huge amount of changes. So, who knows where we will end up, but I wanted to get you guys started with all the research that I have done to this point and at least give you guys a direction to start following if you are playing minions this league. So last league, Lich and Infernalist were really good at minions, both of them were. Lich usually did a little bit better if you were playing with caster-based minions because you could manipulate your mana with a weapon swap Sigil of Power. That is still going to be the case if you are going to be stacking a large amount of power into your caster minions. A Lich build probably is going to be better, and Lich does a lot better with Energy Shield, so that will be probably a different type of build that we will figure out later on. But right now, we don't even know if the caster minions are going to be the strongest ones in the meta. I did do a bit of a meta breakdown, changes breakdown for this league, but who knows because there's still a lot of missing information. So yeah, the answer is we don't know, but what we do know is that generally speaking, the area of effect capabilities of minions have been nerfed while almost everything else has been buffed. And that is why we are going to be stacking the Infernal Hound a lot. And the Infernal Hound is, of course, an Infernalist exclusive gem. You can only get it through the Ascendancy itself directly. So it is not so simple to just do it normally. That is why we are going to get Loyal Hellhound first to summon our Infernal Hound. Now, there are a few ways to build Infernalist. Obviously, you can get a huge amount of Spirit, and they have nerfed Spirit in several different ways. So that is also a pretty big node. Altered Flesh is actually insane now that we can apply armor to elemental damage because it breaks down the damage. So when you take cold damage, 20% of it becomes fire. This is insanely strong because if you have armor is applied to elemental damage, it considers it as two separate instances of damage. So your whole armor is applied to the 20% of the cold, and then your whole armor is applied to, the 20% of fire, and the whole armor is applied to the 80% of the cold. So breaking down damage in different elements really favors this new mechanic that we have, and I'll explain that in a second. Ultimately, you might get enough spirit that you don't need Baydat's Will, and you can go Seething Body, which is basically 50% more damage as fire across the board on all your minions. It's very strong stuff. So Infernalist is still really good, Witch is still really good because you get all these minion passives that are not available if you play any other Ascendancy. I am not going with revive speed. I am actually just investing a little bit more into minion life, and I'm going to hope that they stay alive. One of the really big new clusters here is gigantic following. So your minions are gigantic and 25% reduced reservation efficiency. This actually makes them cost more spirit to use. Gigantic minions do 20% more damage. They have 20% more life and they are 20% larger. And I think minions that are 20% larger also increases their area of effect, at least when it comes to the Infernal Hound, because it is in a radius from it. Speaking of the Infernal Hound went from a 1.5-meter radius with its burning aura to a 2.5-meter radius. Now, you might think this is not a big deal. It is a 67% increase in radius, but if you know a little bit of math, the radius of a circle impacting area, this is actually equivalent to almost 180% more area, literally a triple multiplier on the area coverage of the burn radius. And if we make them gigantic, so 20% bigger, basically the idea is to cover the area of effect needs with the Infernal Hellhound and the gigantic one and the massively improved area of effect version. Now, gigantic means you won't be able to have as many summons, but I think that will be fine. This is now increased reservation efficiency. It's not reduced cost. Reduced cost is a lot stronger because you could stack it to just, crazy levels and get huge hordes of minions. Can't really do that anymore, but I'll explain how it works. We still get the typical minion stuff. This minion cluster was moved down much closer to the warrior side, but it's a really important cluster, and we actually are going to the warrior all the way this time because we are actually playing armor. So the new type of mechanic this league for the armor is armor applying to elemental damage. As I went over this is a bad mechanic in PoE2 because it applies before resistances, meaning that it just your armor just gets crushed every single time. Now, the main thing that I didn't account for is how large these values are, right? So basically, we get this 15% applies to fire damage, 15 applies to fire damage. So we're at 60 applies to fire damage. And we also get heat proofing over here, which is another 10, another 10, another 10, and another 30. So we have 120% of armor applies to fire damage. Yes, it's before resists, but when we take like a cold hit, 20% of that becomes fire. That 20% is a small hit, actually, and we have 120% of our armor and possibly much more because this is an affix that can show up on armor pieces of gear. We actually almost eliminate that damage fully. So this is kind of a new little tech here. It seems really strong for Infernalist. We can also get the defend with 200% armor against crits. Possibly crits will actually do less damage than non-crits in some situations. This is kind of the Infernalist character I intended to make when Path of Exile 2 was released, and now it seems that we actually can kind of make that. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't Energy Shield just way better? It is still really, really good. Possibly in super late game, Energy Shield is still better. I would agree with that, actually. But I think that for mapping, for playability, for just getting started in the first like several days to a week, armor is looking really good. And that's why we are using lots of armor. Armor everywhere. That's right. Armor is in. We also have block stopping all forms of damage other than red boss hits, making Raise Shield a completely crazy ability. Now, the main thing that I didn't really know is that they removed a huge amount of support gems. So the old Unbreakable no longer exists. The best we could do is Steadfast. You have 50% more stun threshold while channeling supported skills. Basically, while Raise Shield is really, really busted, you can't really mitigate the stun meter of your shield building up. So you can't just block there forever. The best way to mitigate that is actually just taking less damage by using armor. While a lot of the small hits will basically not load your stun meter at all because they basically get crushed by your armor, some of the big hits will actually fill up your stun meter quite a bit, and it's good to have a bit of that. In terms of gearing, that's why we're just getting a whole bunch of armor and a whole bunch of life. Mobility and knockback is actually usable with Raise Shield because Raise Shield now has a built-in mechanic to if you Raise Shield block something and stop Raise Shielding, you slap the mobs basically. So knocking them back gives you a window to escape. And Shield Charge is slower, but I tested it in game. It's still an incredible skill to spam. You want to keep it at low level. Steadfast, of course, and Knockback, again, you want to kind of go through mobs. Also keep in mind, when you are shield charging, your shield is technically raised, So when you're facing a dangerous boss, you literally just shield charge around it the whole time like you're Superman. Flammability is becoming elemental weakness, so it's affecting all the elements. Pain offering, pretty similar as always. Now, when it comes to the minions, you will notice that we have a lot of them. The idea is to have one minion of each kind because now we can repeat the support gems. So we have Muster there. We have Muster and Feeding Frenzy basically on every single minion. The idea is that we have as many different minions as possible to make them all do significantly more damage. The Infernal Hound is a permanent minion, so it counts towards the total. It's also why you really, really absolutely need to have a skeleton warrior based scepter more so than ever before. It's super important because having another minion there is really strong. Also, keep in mind that your minions will reserve more spirit because of gigantic, but Infernal Hellhound reserves 0, and Skeleton Warrior also reserves 0. So that's very, very big. The idea is that you get, in this case, 8 different permanent minions, giving you a 56% more damage with every single one that you can use the muster gem on, and you can use the muster gem on all of them. The minion setup is not like before, where you stack one minion like crazy, and then you don't really have any good supports for your other ones. Right now, I think the best way to use minions is to have as many different ones as possible and to optimize each and every one of them. Okay, and you can do that with Muster and Feeding Frenzy, giving them huge damage bonuses. They removed a lot of the gems that did like a good bit of damage, so there's actually not many gems that increase damage very much. Muster is twice as good as Feeding Frenzy in this setup, and there's not any gem even close to as good as Feeding Frenzy for minions. So just keep that in mind. This Muster setup is going to do crazy damage. I'm not focusing on crit because I'm expecting a lot of the damage from the Hellhound to come from its aura, which scales based on damage and life, and also because the support gems have been gutted like crazy. Controlled destruction, spells deal 25% more hit damage, spells cannot critical hits. This is now a very premium gem. And so if you remove the crit off your casters and your Hellhound is doing a huge amount of its damage with an ability that can't crit, then it's really just not worth going into crit at all. Now in this setup, as I have it, a breakdown here, you typically just want one of each minion. Now you will get 2 warriors from the scepter, so that's fine. I don't know what the best specter is. Just get one of whatever you want that you can afford. Probably at the very start, you're going to want to use a terracotta warrior because they're going to be a really low spirit cost. Just one frost mage to apply chill and freeze and give you another muster bonus. But again, the frost mage is not a support unit, right? Like it has muster for 60 more damage, feeding frenzy for 30 more damage, control destruction for 25 more damage, multi-shot to like double its damage. And yeah, you might use one, but it's going to do like full damage compared to someone who's actually stacking frost mages. That's really the key difference now. The storm mages you do generally want to use for shock, but again, you are using huge damage supports. I don't know for a fact, but it seems to me like the skeletal sniper might be one of the strongest single target minions this patch because it's fairly cost efficient for the spirit cost. The new quality bonus gives it 20% more damage. It can't miss, so you don't have to worry about investing in any of that. And the attack based gems are a little bit stronger. Elemental Armament will give you 36% more attack damage if the target is chilled in any form, like even like 3% chill from your Frost Mage, which it will be, ignited. So you'll get at least 24, and then when the Storm Mage lands a shock, it will last forever, I believe, because of Stormfire. So it will get the full 36% bonus off of that. So that's really good. Now, in terms of the buttons that you're going to use, you can use the Froth Mage for its defensive cooldown, but it's not that important. The Brute, however, gets a new cooldown, which is a war cry that intimidates nearby enemies. Intimidate in Path of Exile 2 just makes the target take 10% more damage. So you are going to be using your Brute cooldown on cooldown, okay? You want to be pressing that button as much as possible because it's going to up your damage significantly. And I would use more different minions if I could, but we actually hit the 9 minion gem cap pretty quickly. So it is what it is. You're probably going to need about 300, maybe a little bit less spirit to cast one of each of these, and you typically do want to have 2 clerics, just so if one of them dies, it can res the other one. And if you do that, you will have all of your muster bonuses online. Once you have one of each of the minions, again, I don't really know which minion will outperform each other because they're all kind of doing peak efficiency, and the minions were recently rebalanced. Maybe like a Spectre will do best. Maybe you need a little bit more area of effect, so you'll use some Frost Mages because they will be doing pretty well with multi-shot. Who knows? Maybe the Storm Mage does a little bit better having overlaps on shocks. Maybe you're not missing area of effects, you're missing single target. Maybe you use some snipers, you know? After you have one of each of these minions, it's really up to you on how you want to use them, and I hope that is pretty clear in the guide. In terms of defenses, you're going to try to get like 3 to 4K life. You do really need strong life rolls on your gear to make that happen, so be mindful of that. You are going to be able to get quite a lot of strength from the passive tree, so you will have a pretty good baseline there. If you have Baydat's Will, you will lose a quarter of your life, but you do gain a little bit from some of the life passives back. If you are feeling that you're dying quite a bit, you can consider dropping Baydat's Will and see where it goes from there. There's also the possibility to go like hybrid, but I really feel pretty good about the armor applies to elemental damage, specifically because of that node that breaks apart the elemental damage buckets, let's say. So overall, I think this will look pretty good. And again, if you guys want the full written guide, make sure to check it out on Mobalytics. And let's give it a try, and I will be updating the guide as I play this season. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.